Miami, February 14th, 1971, 2:14 a.m. The Fontainebleau Hotel, Presidential Suite 3208. 5 Italian Mafia bosses sat around a mahogany conference table. The room smelled of Cuban cigars and expensive whiskey. In the center of that table sat 2 leather briefcases, both open, both filled with neatly banded stacks of $100 bills. $5 million. Across from them sat Frank Matthews, 26 years old, alone, no weapon visible, no backup waiting in the hallway. The offer was simple. Work for them, not against them. Take the money, join their system, accept their authority. Frank Matthews looked at that $5 million for exactly 11 seconds. The silence in that room was absolute. Then he said 3 words that changed organized crime forever. To understand why 5 mafia bosses were offering Frank Matthews $5 million at 2 in the morning, you need to know what he'd done to them. In 1970, Matthews committed what the mafia considered the unforgivable sin. He went around them. For decades, the Italian Mafia had controlled the heroin trade in America through the French connection. They had exclusive relationships with Corsican suppliers in Marseille, France. Everyone bought from them. Everyone paid their prices. Everyone followed their rules. The Mafia's monopoly was absolute. Frank Matthews asked a question nobody else had dared to ask. Why? Why couldn't he go directly to France? Why couldn't he buy from the same Corsican suppliers the Mafia used? He didn't ask permission. In early 1970, he flew to Marseille, walked into the same waterfront cafes where Mafia representatives had been doing business for 20 years, and made his own deals. He was honest with the Corsicans. He told them exactly how much he could move, exactly how he'd pay, and exactly why working with him made sense. The suppliers were impressed. Within 6 months, Frank Matthews was buying hundreds of kilos directly from France, paying 30% less than the Mafia's prices, and undercutting Italian distributors in 15 major cities. The 5 families were absolutely furious. This wasn't just business competition. This was a black man from North Carolina telling the most powerful criminal organization in American history that he didn't need them, didn't respect their monopoly, and wasn't afraid of consequences. They tried intimidation first. Messages were sent. Associates were threatened. Matthews didn't stop. He expanded into 3 more states. But here's where it gets truly shocking. The Mafia leadership had a strategic discussion about Frank Matthews. They realized something important. Killing Matthews would be easy. 1 contract, and he'd be gone. But it would also be stupid. Matthews had already established direct relationships with French suppliers. He had distribution networks in 21 states. He employed hundreds of people. If they killed him, his organization wouldn't disappear. It would fracture into dozens of smaller independent operators, all with their own French connections. The Mafia would trade 1 organized problem for 20 chaotic problems. Even worse, killing a high-profile black businessman would bring media attention, civil rights activists, and federal investigators they couldn't afford. So the Mafia made a rare decision. Offer partnership. Not as equals. They never viewed anyone as equal, but as controlled partnership where Matthews would operate under their umbrella, sharing profits, accepting their authority. And to make the offer genuinely attractive, they put $5 million on the table. That's how the February 14th meeting in Miami came to be. The 5 men in Presidential Suite 3208 that night represented serious power. Carlo Gambino's nephew, a Genovese family captain, 2 Lucchese representatives, and 1 mediator from Meyer Lansky's organization. These weren't street soldiers. These were men who controlled territories, moved millions monthly, owned politicians and judges. They'd flown to Miami specifically for this meeting because Matthews had been ignoring their messages everywhere else. Frank Matthews arrived at exactly 2 a.m., dressed in a dark gray suit, white shirt, thin black tie. Professional, respectful in appearance. When he walked into Suite 3208, the 5 bosses were already seated. They didn't stand. One of them gestured to the empty chair across the table. Matthews sat. Someone poured whiskey into crystal glasses. No one picked up their glass. Joseph Armone, the Gambino representative, presented the offer. He was late 40s, silver hair slicked back, expensive suit, diamond ring catching the light. "Mr. Matthews," he began, voice calm and measured. "You've done well for yourself. You've shown courage and business intelligence. We respect that." He paused. "But you've also created significant problems for our operations. Dealers who used to buy from us are buying from you. Prices have dropped. The market is confused. This isn't sustainable." He pushed one of the briefcases across the table toward Matthews. $5 million, cash, right now. In exchange, you work with us. You keep your French contacts. You keep your network. But you coordinate with us, share territory, respect the structure. Think of it as a merger, not a takeover. Frank Matthews looked down at the briefcase. The money was visible, neatly organized, purple bands marking $5,000 stacks. He didn't reach for it. He didn't touch it. 11 seconds of complete silence. You could hear people breathing. Then Matthews looked up and spoke for the first time. "I appreciate the offer," Matthews said, voice steady and calm. $5 million is serious money, shows respect, shows you understand what I've built." The 5 men across from him relaxed slightly. They thought he was accepting. But Matthews wasn't finished. "The problem is this. I didn't build what I built so I could work for someone else. I built it so I wouldn't have to." The temperature in the room dropped instantly. One of the Lucchese representatives leaned forward, face hardening. "Mr. Matthews, I don't think you understand what you're turning down. Not just money, protection, peace. You're making a dangerous choice." Matthews interrupted him. He'd never interrupted a made man before, but he did it now. Frank Matthews said 3 words. "I'm nobody's employee." Wait, don't miss this detail. What made those 3 words absolutely devastating wasn't that they were aggressive. Matthews wasn't aggressive at all. What made them devastating was their finality. He didn't say, "I won't work for you." He didn't say, "I prefer independence." He said, "I'm nobody's employee." Present tense, statement of identity, not preference. He wasn't negotiating. He was declaring who he was. Joseph Armone tried a different approach, voice taking on a more reasonable tone. "Frank, be smart. You've had a good run, but runs end. Federal heat comes. Competition gets violent. Suppliers get arrested. You need insurance. We're offering you insurance." Matthews nodded, showing he understood. "I understand insurance," he replied. "But insurance means I'm protected as long as I keep paying premiums and following the insurance company's rules. I don't want to rent safety. I want to own my business." The Genovese captain, silent until now, spoke. His voice was harder, carrying an implicit threat. "You think you're safe in Miami? You think we can't reach you?" Frank Matthews responded with a question. "If you were planning to kill me tonight, would you have brought $5 million to this meeting?" The room went silent. Because Matthews was right. The money was proof of their intentions. They wanted a deal more than they wanted his death. But here's what nobody understood except Matthews. He'd planned for this exact meeting for months. If they offered partnership, he would refuse, because accepting meant acknowledging their authority. If they threatened violence, he had insurance, documentation of all his contacts and routes, ready to go to the FBI if he disappeared. They weren't dealing with a lucky street dealer. They were dealing with someone who'd already thought 5 moves ahead. Frank Matthews stood up. "Gentlemen," he said, "I genuinely appreciate your time tonight. I appreciate the respect shown by this offer, but I'm going to continue doing exactly what I've been doing. If that creates problems for you, I'm sorry, but those are your problems, not mine." He turned and walked toward the door. Behind him, the 5 most powerful mafia representatives in America sat in absolute shock. No one had ever walked away from $5 million. As Matthews reached for the door handle, Joseph Armoni called out one last time. "Matthews, you're making a serious mistake." Matthews turned back. "Maybe I am," he said. "But it's my mistake to make. That's the whole point." And then he walked out, leaving $5 million on the table. What happened after that meeting became legend. The 5 mafia bosses sat in that suite for another 2 hours, debating what to do. Some wanted Matthews dead immediately. Others argued his death would create worse problems. Eventually, they reached a decision. Watch him. Let him operate. See if the federal government takes him down. If he survives, revisit the conversation. If he fails, problem solved. Frank Matthews understood he'd bought time, not permanent safety. He knew the mafia's patience wasn't infinite, but he also knew that every month he operated successfully made him more valuable alive than dead. Every new territory, every connection, every $1 million, it all made him harder to eliminate without creating chaos. For the next 2 years, from February 1971 to July 1973, Frank Matthews operated at the absolute peak of his power. His organization moved product through 21 states. His annual revenue was estimated at $100 million, over $700 million in today's money. But Matthews never became flashy. He lived well, but not ostentatiously. He paid his people fairly. He never shorted suppliers. He built a reputation as someone reliable, intelligent, and absolutely independent. The Italian Mafia never made another partnership offer to Frank Matthews. They watched him, occasionally interfered with his operations, sometimes created problems for his distributors. But they never seriously tried to kill him, because Matthews had been exactly right in his analysis. He was more valuable as a known, predictable operator than as a martyr whose death would fragment the black drug trade into chaos. And those 3 words, "I'm nobody's employee," became his permanent legend. People repeated them in barbershops, on street corners, in prison yards across America. Young hustlers adopted them as philosophy. The idea that a black man could look at $5 million and genuine power from the mafia and still say no because he absolutely refused to be anyone's employee, that meant something profound. That showed a different kind of strength. This is what separated Frank Matthews from countless others in the drug trade. He understood that real power isn't about money or fear or connections. Real power is autonomy, the ability to make your own decisions, control your own destiny, and accept your own consequences. It's about looking at $5 million and understanding that taking it means selling something infinitely more valuable, your independence. So remember this. On February 14th, 1971, at 2:14 in the morning, in a luxury hotel suite in Miami, 5 Italian Mafia bosses offered Frank Matthews $5 million and a partnership that would have made him wealthy and protected for life. And Frank Matthews, 26 years old, sitting alone across from 5 of the most dangerous men in America, looked at that offer and said 3 words that proved, "Some things aren't for sale. I'm nobody's employee." That's who Frank Matthews was. That's why he became a legend.